Hey everyone, welcome to BurpSuite and You. Welcome to, if this is the first talk that you're tuning into for GrayHat, welcome. Today we're going to talk about BurpSuite. This is going to be a nice introduction. If you haven't used BurpSuite before, or maybe you're not that confident with it, we're going to talk about the various components of BurpSuite. I'm going to talk about how you can go about getting better with it, and then we're going to talk about a quick demo with it. So real quick, here's an overview of the talk. First, we're going to do a Who Am I slide, obligatory, I know. We're going to talk about why you should actually bother with learning BurpSuite. We're going to talk about the various features of BurpSuite, as well as the tools within BurpSuite. We're going to do a demo, and then we're going to go over those extra resources as I mentioned. So first, who am I? I am Dark. I'm John Peters. I am the content director for Try Hack Me, and I'm also the community manager for over there. I am a penetration tester for State Farm, and then I have my socials linked down there. I'm a YouTube creator. Just started that not terribly long ago. And then I'm Darkstar7471 on Twitter. Why should I learn about BurpSuite? What is so special about this that I see everyone using it? BurpSuite is widely regarded as the de facto tool that you need to know. Not just it's nice to know for core penetration testing because it allows you to do a lot. You need to know it for web app pen testing. While there are alternatives to this in the form of, oh my goodness, OWASP Zap, there we go. BurpSuite is versatile and it's incredibly widely supported. Additionally, it has a great community backing to it that really helps it. So again, you need to know it for web app pen testing. It's very, very useful for that. Additionally, if you want to go into bug bounties, if you want to get into this and go into web app hacking on like HackerOne or BugCrowd, you are going to want to know how to use BurpSuite. It's a tool that you're going to use through and through. And a lot of people that do bug bounty actually recommend buying the professional version of it just because there are so many features that you're going to end up wanting to use it for. Additionally, if you're going into bug bounty, we'll talk about some additional resources further on in this talk that you can use for that and training with all that. But there's serious money in that if you're good at it. Additionally, looking at certifications, looking at the OSCP, the Offensive Security Certified Professional Exam, that is one of the exams and certifications, furthermore, that is regarded as its core within InfoSec, and you need it for moving forward. The OSCP covers some light usage of BurpSuite. You're going to need to know how to use it for intercepting perhaps maybe an exploit request or something that you need to get information out of a request for an exploit to work, and just some basic things for that. Typically that entails using repeater and using proxy with intercept. Additionally, what typically follows the OSCP, however it's not always this case, is the OSWE. As you can see its icon there on the right. This is the Offensive Security Web Exploitation Expert exam. That is if you want to go into web app pen testing and specifically start going into some further AppSec, that is the exam that typically you're going to take after the OSCP, and I believe that's actually what OffSec recommends beyond their Wi-Fi pen testing certification. So what is BurpSuite? I mentioned this a little bit earlier. BurpSuite is widely regarded as the de facto tool to use when performing web app pen testing. Now, BurpSuite is one of those tools that it actually comes pre-installed on Kali for this reason, because it's just that useful. You're going to use this for if you're doing web app pen testing, or if you need to examine a web app, odds are you're going to have BurpSuite open. You're going to need it. For this talk, for the sake of keeping this useful to everyone that's listening, I'm going to focus on the community edition. However, I'm going to briefly touch on some of the paid features that you can find with the professional version. So let's start off by talking about the proxy. This is probably the first feature that you're going to come across within BurpSuite, because you're going to set it up and you're going to wonder, wait a minute, I can't load this web page. What's going on? And that's just because the proxy, it's probably set to intercept and you can't load your request. So this is what allows us to actually push our traffic through BurpSuite for further analysis. If we can't put our traffic into BurpSuite, we can't look at it, and there's not a whole lot that we can do, and then BurpSuite's kind of like not that useful. We can use it for other things outside of this, but typically speaking, you're going to need to use the proxy. So the proxy itself allows us to do interception, which is sort of a man in the middle, but it's our own traffic that's going in and out of our web browser. Typically, you're going to do this with Firefox. You can do this with other web browsers, and I'll show this a little bit more in the demo later. So requests will, by default, require our authorization to be sent when we've got the interception to be enabled within the proxy. We can actually modify our requests inline, as I mentioned, similar to what you might see with a man-in-the-middle attack, and then we can send them on. And this can be really, really interesting, and we'll go into this a little bit further with Repeater and Intruder, but we can do some things that web developers probably didn't intend to be done with their website and probably didn't necessarily plan for. And then we can also drop requests that we don't want to be sent. This can be really useful when we see requests, for example, if we want to see what a button does, or maybe we want to see what happens if we just don't send a request. Like maybe we send one request in the middle of a form and then we just don't send the next one. We just drop it and we just go back. It can be really useful to see what's going to happen and if we don't want it to happen. Very, very useful for that. Next, we have the targeting part of BurpSuite. This is arguably the most important part because it's what allows you to actually set your scope. Now, what do I mean when I'm talking about scope? That is going to be what you're actually targeting. You don't want to, so for example, if I'm going through and doing a bug bounty test on TryHackMe's website, I don't want to be attacking Google at the same time because that's out of scope. It's not within where my project has been defined. I'm not allowed to attack it unless, otherwise specified. It's out of scope. We can use this to effectively create a sitemap of the application that we're testing as well. Sometimes you'll be given this, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll be given this and you won't have a very good sitemap, or it might not be complete. We can use this to effectively just map out the application because it's going to track everywhere that we visit on the website. And I'll show you that a little bit more as we get into the demo. Additionally, it introduces the idea of happy path browsing. So what do I mean when I say happy path? This is actually something that comes out of the OWASP Juice Shop exercises by Brian Kimmich, I want to believe. And I likely just butchered his last name. Happy path browsing is browsing the web application or the web app as a normal user would, as a happy user would that's not trying to hunt down things. We can go through and say, for example, if we're browsing Amazon's website, we can go through and pretend to just be a normal consumer, browsing it as the happy path, walking the happy path rather, and finding the full scope of the actual web app that we're looking at. That again builds out our sitemap and it gives us essentially what we can work with, and it's part of our enumeration phase. And again, enumeration is going to be the most important step because it allows us to figure out what we can attack, what are all the parts, what might be interacting under the hood that maybe we just don't see it, and maybe we can revisit it later on. It's very useful. And additionally, the targeting part is useful for testing authorization issues or access violation issues where, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with the extender, and specifically authorize. You can see that something maybe can't be accessed or can be accessed by one user. Maybe a privileged user can access the administrator panel, but the low privileged user, just a normal user of the web app, can't access that. However, maybe you force navigation to a page that's not just the landing page for the admin portal. Maybe it's something a little bit beyond that, and that user can navigate to that and load the page. That's a problem. And that's where you can start getting into access violation issues, where you can see how the website scope and the actual map can vary depending on the user that you're looking at it with. Next, we're going to get into probably the first actual tool within BurpSuite that you're going to use. This is Repeater. So as the name suggests, this allows us to repeat requests. We can take requests that we've either captured or we've seen, as long as they've gone through the BurpSuite proxy, and we can send them over to Repeater, and we can modify them, we can do experimentation with them, and then we can send them on and see what we get back. This is really, really useful if we need to go through and start looking at, maybe we suspect that there's SQL injection in the actual username or the authentication field, and maybe we don't get it right one time. It's really, really helpful to put it in Repeater, and then we can send it over and over again just to see what happens. And again, it allows us to resend requests, and we can actually view either the raw response or we can render it using BurpSuite. That's one of the newer features that they've added as we please. And that gives us a pretty good idea of what we're working with. Now, sort of the automated and more powerful version of Repeater is Intruder within BurpSuite. Intruder is arguably the most powerful and versatile tool within our arsenal with BurpSuite. It allows for things from fuzzing to brute forcing and so on and so forth. Now, there are 4 different attack types within Intruder, and keep in mind this is going to be once you've taken it from an experimentation stage and you want to go through and maybe you know that there's SQL injection at a point, or maybe you know that there might be cross-site scripting in an area and you want to go through and automate testing of what might be there. You can go through and send it to Intruder, and you have these 4 options to pick from. The first one is going to be Sniper. This is the most popular attack type, and this cycles through our selected position, so we can select different areas within our request that we want to change things, and it puts the next available payload, so the item from whatever word list we have loaded, in each position. So think of it as you're going through a magazine in a sniper rifle that you have to go one bullet at a time, except it's a word within your word list and it's being put in the request. You have to go one at a time. Likewise, or similarly, we have Battering Ram, which is similar to Sniper, but Battering Ram it uses one set of payloads like Sniper. However, unlike Sniper, Battering Ram puts every payload into every position. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, where if there's 4 positions, we put 1 in position 1, 2 in position 2, 3 in position 3, and so on and so forth. Battering Ram takes position 1, position 2, position 3, and puts item from the word list, item 1 in it, and then item 2, and you just shove everything into every single position just to see what happens. And this can be really useful, especially if maybe you don't know which field is going to give you the results that you're looking for. Now, and again, think of this as like a battering ram where you have this wide surface area that you're impacting with the battering ram. Now, next we have Pitchfork, and the Pitchfork attack type allows us to use multiple payload sets, so 1 per position selected, and iterate through both payload sets simultaneously. For example, if we selected 2 positions, say a username field and a password field, we can provide a username and a password payload list. Intruder will then cycle through the combinations of usernames and passwords, resulting in a total number of combinations equaling the smallest payload provided. So it iterates through them simultaneously. And say, for example, our username list has 10 words on it, and our password list has 20. Well, we're only going to go through 10 because it goes through those simultaneously. And then last but not least, we have Cluster Bomb. The Cluster Bomb attack type allows us to use multiple payload sets, so 1 per position selected, again, similar to Pitchfork, and iterate through all combinations of the payload list that we provide. So, for example, if we selected 2 positions, say, again, a username field and a password field, we can provide a username and password list. And again, this sounds very similar to Pitchfork. Intruder will then cycle through the combinations of username and passwords, resulting in a total number of combinations equaling the usernames times the passwords. So it's every single combination that we can get that we're going to iterate through. And again, do note that this gets really lengthy, especially if you're using the Community Edition. One thing to note with Intruder is that Intruder is rate limited in the Community Edition. So you can still use it, but it's very slow. There are additions that you can put onto this, or extensions rather, once you have the premium edition or the professional edition rather. There is Turbo Intruder that can make it even faster, but again, those are paid features, so just something to be aware of. So useful though, because we can go through it even though it's a little bit slow. We can still use Intruder to fuzz things for us. Next we have Sequencer. Sequencer is a tool that's meant to be an analysis of randomness. So it's meant to check things that are meant to be random, but they're not always random. It represents a core tool in the proper web application pen test because, well, if things aren't random, that's a big problem because we can abuse that. And you may notice there are some things on there for examples that if they're abused, that's a big problem. The first one is going to be session tokens. Session tokens are what actually define your individual session on a website. So for example, if I'm logged in to try hack me, I have a session token that's tied to me. If you can get that, or you can guess that, and it's maybe not random, or maybe it's fixated, where I get the same, or maybe there's an issue of session fixation rather, where I get the same session token whenever I log in. That's a problem, and we can find that with Sequencer. Additionally, we have anti-CSRF tokens. Those are cross-site request forgery tokens. That's something that loads in the web page whenever you're making a request, that you want to make sure that it's not being made by some other site there. We'll talk a little bit about that more potentially going on. And then we have password reset tokens, something that you might not have realized whenever you're doing a password reset request. Now, everyone's done these. If you, next time you do a password request, maybe even do it after this talk, just to see what's happening, go in and take a look at the URL that you're provided. There should be a semi-random, or somewhat hopefully random, string of characters at the end of the URL that specifies your specific token for performing that password request. Now, imagine if that weren't random. Imagine if we were able to guess it. Well, there's opportunities for social engineering. There's a whole lot you can do with that, where it very quickly becomes a problem where we can potentially get a hold of someone else's account. Next, we have Decoder and Comparer. Decoder, this is something that I don't personally heavily recommend using, just because CyberChef is much, much more useful. Decoder allows us to go through and take various encodings and either decode them or encode specific things. It's very useful, for example, if you want to do URL encoding and other things like that. And again, I do recommend using CyberChef instead. Decoder has a magic mode that is kind of nice, but CyberChef is more versatile overall and ultimately provides a lot more useful tools. And if you haven't used CyberChef before, I highly recommend checking it out. It is, especially if you're doing a CTF, it's going to be your best friend. Next, we have Compare, which is really, really similar to the diff command. That's going to take two things that you throw at it, and it's going to compare them, trying to find what is different. So, for example, say maybe you have a bunch of different web requests that you're trying to find the differences between two of them and try to find what changes. So maybe you're looking for, maybe you are trying to do cross-site scripting or HTML injection. You're trying to find where what you put into the page comes back. Or maybe you're trying to get a password list off of, maybe you're fuzzing for something and you can get a list of users through user enumeration. You can go through and take compare those two requests, and you can compare it in two different modes, either words or via the bytes in the actual request response. And you can get the difference there. And again, very, very similar to the diff command in Linux. This is actually very useful, especially if you're getting a lot back in a request, and it's web pages, modern web pages and modern websites are very crowded. They will have a lot in their response. This can be really useful in that specific case. Next, we have Extender, which Extender is similar to installing mods in Minecraft. This allows you to add things that extend or give you additional functionality. Now, one thing to note with this, you do need to have Jython. This is the Java implementation of Python. Very cool. Installed. This will actually, BurpSuite Extender will walk you through the installation of this. It's very nice. You just need the standalone version, and you point it at it, and you say, I have Jython installed here, and then it just knows what to do with that. But we have a bunch of different mods that we can install. I've listed a couple of the mods that I specifically use. There is an article, actually, that I have linked in the notes for this slide, and I should have the slides link sent to the organizers of the talk that I'm giving here. That has a link to a bunch of the popular extensions that you can get. I do recommend checking this out, especially if you've potentially used BurpSuite before, and maybe you're just not as familiar with the various extensions, but that are, maybe you've just never played with the extensions before. You can do a lot of fun things with this. So Logger++ gives you additional logging functionality. Request Smuggler, James Kettle, I want to say, gave a talk specifically on this, where you can do some malform requests and you can get things to slip through between the front end and the back end servers, and you can get weird things to happen where you can hijack other people's requests. Very cool, and that is an extension that does all that for you. Autorize, I mentioned this before. This is something that you can use to specifically go through and check access violation issues. Burp's team server, this is so that you can go through and do a collaborative pen test using a team server that essentially it's a chat server that lets you go through and interact with your teammates on that. Retire.js will go through and actually look for different retired JavaScript libraries that have issues. And then there's a whole bunch of other extensions that you can go through and get. Again, I do recommend grabbing the slides for this. I do have a link to that article in the notes. And then here's some of the premium features that we specifically have. So the first thing that we have is the scanner. This is the big draw for the professional version, beyond just not having Intruder rate limited. Scanner will go through, and I do have a sample of the output here, and it will do a rough scan as you're going through, and either as you're actually browsing the website, or you can set it to run as an automated task after the fact. And it will attempt to identify specific issues within the website. Now, this is something that, again, it's very nice, but you need to go through and actually verify the results from it. It will give you tentative, and it's usually pretty decent at highlighting areas that need further investigation. However, it's something that, again, they need further investigation. So Scanner can go through and identify areas that may have issues, or almost certainly have issues, that you need to go back through and identify. So if you're not as familiar with what you may need to pick on within a web app, the Scanner can help a lot with that. One thing to note, depending on what bug bounty you are doing, they might not allow using Burp Scanner. So just something to be aware of. Make sure that you check the actual bounty, what they specify on the actual client page for further information. Collaborator Client and ClickBandit, those are really interesting ones. Collaborator Client can be really useful. I believe this one is specifically for if you are sending, for example, blind SQL injection. Well, it's blind. You can't get anything back on the page. That is SQL injection that maybe you can do out of bounds communication, where, for example, in the case of Collaborator Client, it will send a request, or it will make a payload that you can put in that will actually go through, and it will ping something that, or attempt a DNS lookup against infrastructure that PortSwigger owns, and then it will let you know, hey, this happened, you actually did have something come out the other end, and that way you don't have to worry about maintaining public infrastructure on your specific end that you have to worry about. It might be blocked by the client. And then ClickBandit, you can go through and use that to make clickjacking requests and payloads. So something very useful. Again, these are professional tools, so very, very cool to play with. And then we'll go ahead and jump in the demo. This will be a pretty quick overview of the actual tools. I'm going to show you where you can find this in Kali, and we're going to go ahead, and once we're back, we'll jump into that. All right, and we're back. So I've gone ahead and I've jumped over to Kali Linux, and I've opened just a basic Firefox page. I've just opened ExploitDB in this specific case, and we're going to go ahead and walk through getting the actual CA certificate installed really quickly, and then we're going to talk about where the various tools are within BurpSuite. So I've gone ahead, I've got this open, and then we'll go ahead and click on the Kali logo up here in the top left, and we can search Burp, and then go ahead and click on BurpSuite, and then we can close that, and we'll click Next on Temporary Project, and then Start on Use Burp Defaults. You won't typically need to mess with that. That's specifically if you want to go through and fine tune maybe the proxy settings, or maybe you have a custom configuration for BurpSuite. Up here in the top, this is example output from using the scanning tool, so you can see how it gives you high-level overviews of where those issues were found. In this specific case, it's with this dummy vulnerable-website.com, and it gives you a description of those issues. So again, very, very useful here. However, I do recommend whenever these items are found, even when they're a certain, or you can see that it gives you this confidence level here, this is something that needs to go through and be reinvestigated. You should always go through and confirm that just to make sure. So yeah, that gives you output. That's sample output from the scanner, and you can see that you have tasks over here on the side. You can start different tasks. This will not be grayed out on the actual professional version, and you can see that it's even telling us that it's only available in BurpSuite Pro. And that's how you can start different tasks such as scanning and whatnot. So I've got this open. I'm going to go ahead and close this advertisement here in the top right. We'll go ahead and click on Proxy, and we can see that Intercept is on. Now, we can note that the proxy has already been started. If we go over to our options, we can see what interface this is listening on as well. We will need this for getting our CA certificate, which we'll go through in just a moment. One thing to be aware of, this is the default, and if you have BurpSuite running from out of the box, this is going to be what it's listening on. So we'll go ahead and jump over to the browser and hop over to localhost 8080, and we're going to see that we are greeted with a BurpSuite Community Edition website. And we need to get this CA certificate up here in the top right. This is going to allow us to relay HTTPS, so secure connections through the BurpSuite proxy and allow them to actually appear. If we don't do this, you're going to go through and try to navigate to sites like TryHackMe or something like that, which has HTTPS, and you're going to see that it won't load. It'll say, this is an insecure connection. This is an untrusted entity that's trying to identify this site. So we need to go through and do this. Go ahead and click on the CA certificate on the top right. That's going to go ahead and download that. I'm not going to do this because I've gone ahead and already done that. And then we can hop up into the actual options. So we go to preferences, and then we can search certificate in the search bar. Make this a little bit bigger. And then we click view certificates, and we can click import, and then we just need to target our cacert.dir. So we can see I've gone ahead and already installed this. Just make sure you check both of the boxes that are there, and then click OK, and you'll be all set with that. So you've gone ahead and got that installed. That's going to allow us to load those secure connections, and we'll go back to ExploitDB. So here at the top, you'll notice I have one more extension that I've installed on my Firefox browser. This is a proxy extension called Foxy Proxy. It allows me to easily switch on and off my proxy so that I can push my traffic through BurpSuite. You can find that just by going through to Google and searching Foxy Proxy. And if you go to Google, this will be one of the first hits, and you can see that we've just got this off of the Firefox add-on store. So you can add that, and then you just need to configure your proxy to be HTTP and then have it going through your local host on port 8080. And then you can add that as your option. You can name it whatever you want. I name it Burp just for simplicity. So we're going to turn that on, click over to Burp, and we'll refresh the page. And we can see that BurpSuite has popped up right away. This is because it intercepted a request that we sent through to the web browser, and we can see it's highlighting the intercept tab. And we can see that we have our HTTP request here, the GET request that we made for exploitdb.com, as well as a bunch of information here. We can see that BurpSuite is working if this specifically happens. If we click forward, our web browser will go ahead and continue with that, and we can see it's making a bunch of other requests. And we can just keep hitting forward, and we can see that it is going to eventually load the entire web page. Now that's all good and fun. However, what if we actually want to modify this request? We can do that even if we've gone ahead and already sent it on. I'm going to go ahead and turn intercept to off, but if we switch over to HTTP history, and we can see that we have all of our requests that have gone through the proxy in this tab. And then we also have WebSockets for things like that. If we go ahead and right click on one of these, we can either add it to scope, which I'm going to do right now. This sets our target specifically that we want. And you can click yes on this. And we can go through and click send to repeater and send to intruder. And again, I'm just right clicking for that. You can also highlight the request and do Control and R and Control and I respectively, and it'll send the request to repeater and intruder. So here we've switched over to repeater. This is where we can actually go through and edit the request. So for example, maybe I just don't want my cookie to be there. I can go through and just delete it, and we can modify our requests accordingly. And we can actually even undo that with Control Z. But we can go through and modify this and change little bits to see what happens. And then we can go up here to the top right and click send just to see what we get back. And you can see over on the right hand side where we've had our response rendered. If we click up in here, we can see this is a weird error that we're getting, but you can see that it will go through and actually render our requests or just provide us the raw output as we please. Additionally, over in Intruder, we can go through it and see that we have more options where we can go through and select different positions. And here it's auto-selected with Sniper, all of the various positions that we might want to attack or inject payloads into, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you can see that over here on the left, we have our targeting tab, where in this specific case, it's already started to build out this sitemap for us, providing us this nice overview of where everything's at and where everything has been requested from within the website. this is a nice map for us to go back through, and we can browse to all these items and see what's going on behind the scenes and under the hood to potentially go back and exploit it. Additionally, over here in Extender, you can see that we can go through and install extensions either with the B App Store, or we can do this manually. Again, a lot of these are premium, so you do need to have the professional version for. However, you can see that there are notes over here. So for example, this is specifically one that requires BurpSuite Professional, but there's a whole bunch that you can do for free. And you can do other magic things with this as well. Perfect. Now that we've gone ahead and done a quick tour of BurpSuite and how we get it all set up, let's go ahead and hop back over to the slides again, and we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up. And we're back. All right. So before we go on, let's talk about some extra resources because you're probably itching to go through and try this out right now. I have 3 resources that I recommend taking a look at. The first one is going to be the PortSwigger Web Academy, and you can see the link for it here on screen. This is a free web academy that is provided by the people that make BurpSuite, and you can go through and try out the different features and learn about different attacks like cross-site scripting, doing CSRF, or potentially SQL injection, a whole bunch of different things. Very, very cool. One thing to note with this, all of this is free. Sometimes you do need the professional version of BurpSuite to do different activities, so just be aware of that. Additionally, I have HackerOne's Hacker 101 BurpSuite playlist linked here. This is a series of videos that HackerOne made, and again, that's going to be the bug bounty site HackerOne that they made over BurpSuite, so you can go through and get a little bit more detail and get even more insight into using BurpSuite. Additionally, we have the Try Hack Me BurpSuite room, and as you probably noticed throughout the talk, I had little numbers hidden on the side, or small codes. This is a subscription room, so just keep that in mind. This is a room that specifically I built out that gives you a nice walkthrough of how to use all these components, and I highly recommend it if you're going to go through and start learning more with BurpSuite. However, as I mentioned, there are some codes hidden throughout. This may be a subscriber room that there's a few subscriber codes hidden throughout this talk, so if you go back through and catch the recording, or maybe you caught them as I was going throughout my slides, go through and grab those and get yourself a subscription. Perfect. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, any comments, or if you want to learn a little bit more, you can check out my Discord. That is going to be linked with these slides. Additionally, you can follow me on YouTube at DarkSec, so youtube.com/c/darksec, or you can follow me on Twitter at darkstar7471. I hope you enjoyed, and have fun with the rest of the conference.